Hey, everybody, welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week we're doing more Bigfoot. It's been a very Bigfooty type of week or so for me. First off, I celebrated a birthday this past Wednesday, turned 51, and got some cool gifts. I'm going to put some pictures up here because the camera's not really cooperating with me to put it up on, in real time here. So I'll put some pictures up. My brother and sister-in-law, they got me this awesome Bigfoot art piece, and it's just got pine trees and Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot is like really soft, felty fabric. It's really nice. So really cool. Lovely Rebecca, she got me this REI belt pack. So it's really good for our shorter day hikes that we like to do. Sometimes if we go for longer hikes, we have like a backpack that has a water bladder system in it. And those are for the longer hikes, but for the shorter ones, this is just like a nice belt pack, and could put water in there and snacks in there and the phones, and very cool. And yeah, Josh and I just went on another camping adventure. And I don't know if you guys saw last week's episode. We did a paranormal campfire chat and talked about, Bigfoot and the White House ghost town that is there in the Silver Lake Wilderness. And there was this cemetery really not far from our campsite, 50, 75 yards away from our campsite. So very cool camping adventure. And as always, we talk about Bigfoot. We had another campfire chat a few months ago back in November when we were at Good Luck Lake, and we talked about a Bigfoot sighting that took place there that someone Josh knows related to him. So it's a story you're not going to hear anywhere else. I will link to that down below if you guys want to go check that out. Paranormal campfire chat at Good Luck Lake. And while we were doing that chat, we were talking about, sorry, my voice cracked there. While we were doing that chat, we were sort of recounting some of the other cemeteries we came across in our camping adventures. And we counted, and we're up to like 15 or 16 trips together now, which is really awesome since 2019. And COVID kind of put a dent in that. And, other scheduling things can ruin that sometimes. But yeah, we've been on a lot of adventures together, and we mentioned John Pond, and we did that. That was our first winter camping trip, and it was really cold, but it was this awesome lean-to, the awesome John Pond, which is in the Siamese Ponds Wilderness. And John Pond kind of sits on the border of uh, Hamilton and Warren counties, and I've talked about Hamilton County on the podcast a few times before, and I will link to those episodes below. It's Bigfoot in the Adirondacks, and I forget the other episode, but I will link to them below, and I'll put them up here so you guys can see them. But yeah, I've never talked about Warren County, and we didn't really have any weird experiences at John Pond. I mean, it was so cold. We found a large cat print like behind the lean-to in the snow, which was cool and also a little freaky. But despite our stories, we have a lot of stories, but from most of our camping trips, nothing happens. They're fun. We have a great time, but nothing spooky or paranormal really happens for the most part on most trips. And same thing happened with John Pond. And it was winter. It was great. It was really a beautiful trip. Like I said, cold. It was a hard hike in, a lot of streams. My foot got wet. And it's just beautiful camping on that pond. But there are a lot of Bigfoot stories from Warren County. And tonight I'm going to focus on some of them because there's a pattern here. And a lot of them happened at this place called Sabbath Day Point. And Sabbath Day Point is famous for the Sabbath Day Massacre during the French and Indian War. And I will link to that down below. But the French and Indian troops, they ambushed the British troops, captured them. And this was in 1757, I believe. But yeah, it was this horrible massacre. And as with many uh, places of tragedy and trauma, there's a lot of paranormal stuff associated with it. And I've seen this a lot with like UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings and hauntings, that Sabbath Day Point comes up a lot. And I'm looking at Warren County on the BFRO website here, and there's a lot of Sabbath Point Bigfoot stories. So we're going to talk about those tonight. Most of these are sort of class B. They're more sounds and other things happening. It's not an actual sighting of the creature, but they're interesting in their own right. Usually I don't deal with like vocalizations or things like that, but these are interesting, and we'll get into those. And let's jump into those right now. Okay, so our first story from Sabbath Day Point comes to us from 2007. A female hiker describes rocks being thrown at her and a female companion near Sabbath Day Point. And this happened August 18th, 2007, Warren County. Nearest road is Route 9, and the nearest town, Sabbath Day Point. And observed, she says, my friend and I were hiking on a trail called 5 Mile Mountain. We were at the top of the mountain when I had this eerie feeling about the woods ahead. I've never felt like that before in the woods during daylight. Now, to stop here real quick, I just want to say, always trust your instinct. Josh and I talked about this on our camping trip previously and a few times before. Trust your instincts. They're there for a reason. And, if you're wrong, you're wrong. But if something is telling you to beware, beware. So she continues, we started to smell rain in the air and it was getting chilly quick. We were already 2 hours into our hike at least. Anyways, we stuck with our gut feeling and started heading back. So good, About 10 minutes later, a big rock came flying from the left towards the right and hit another rock and made a loud crack. The rock must have rolled for at least 5 seconds afterwards. I could tell by the sound the rock made when it hit that it was a big rock. And the fact that it rolled for such a long distance afterward, it had to be someone or something very strong. So right there, she's kind of leaving it open that it's maybe a person. We stuck around the area for another 5 to 7 minutes to see if we could see or hear anything, but no luck. I'd already known that this area had its own encounters with Bigfoot, so I suspected that this is what it was. I decided to start throwing rocks back into the woods in the direction of the first rock as we continued walking back. Maybe not the best idea. I continued this down the trail. I was hoping to get a rock in return, and before long, I did. Another rock came in our direction. They were not thrown directly at us, but above us and behind us. We were in shock. I just couldn't believe that someone or something was throwing rocks back at me. I continued throwing rocks into the woods as I walked, and the rocks were returned. I felt as if it were playful at first, but it then became aggressive. Not surprising. We came to a pond, and the trail wrapped around part of the pond. We heard a tree moving, but it sounded like it was being shaken. The wind was definitely not making the tree make that sound. Keep in mind that something has been rock throwing for at least 20 minutes now. We stopped in this area, and were trying to see where the noise was coming from. I couldn't see a thing. I decided to take a step in the direction of the noise, and I felt my stomach drop. I knew there was something there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. It was one of those feelings you just have to have yourself to understand. So again, instinct. I moved back onto the trail and decided to pick up a few rocks and start throwing them in that direction to see if I could get a return rock. It didn't take long before one came flying back. I decided to be brave again and try to step off the trail and throw a few rocks closer towards where the rocks were being thrown at me. This time I had a rock the size of a baseball. As I was throwing my rock, a rock bigger than mine was also in the air coming towards me. It came extremely close to my head. My friend was on the trail behind me, so she had a clear view of the rock coming towards me. The rock hit a tree behind me and bounced onto the trail. There was no denying that these were not rocks now. The proof was there. It seemed that whatever they were getting annoyed with me. The rocks were now being thrown directly at me instead of around me. We decided to knock it off for a little while and get the heck out of there. About 5 minutes down the way, I suspected that we were being followed out of the woods. So to see if something was still there, I picked up some rocks again. I started throwing them one after another without stopping. I must have thrown about 5 or 6 when a rock came soaring down the high cliff at us. I said to my friend, "See, I told you they were still there." I knew that whatever it was just as curious about me as I was of it. They continued to fire a few more rocks off the cliff at me. They were definitely trying to hit me now. I looked so hard into the woods, but I couldn't see a thing. I thought maybe it was just a person, but I don't believe that it was, especially from the high cliff. A person would have been noticed easily. The last but not least rock was the icing on the cake. I was not even expecting it. We were walking and talking for a few minutes, and I was not throwing any rocks when a rock the size of a softball came down and whizzed past our heads. We both ducked and covered our heads out of instinct. If we did not duck, one of us would have been hit. That was it for me. I knew it was time to get out of those woods and stop messing around. It was an experience I will never forget. I have no idea what is in those woods up there, but that was the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. We will chalk it up in our memory book. I will be returning to this area again. Also notice there was a whining noise that we heard. It sounded like a baby animal. We didn't see anything though. We also heard a few footsteps possibly and some deep knocks. So this is a weird one. Let's go into the follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Paul Mateja. And he says, the witness and a friend entered the trailhead to 5 Mile Mountain at the Tongue Mountain Range off Route 9N. They walked in approximately 1.5 miles, then turned north at a trail junction to 5 Mile Mountain. Before heading north, they stopped at a small pond where they heard unusual whining sound that they could not identify. They continued to walk another 1.5 to 2 miles. The witness thought that this particular trail was little used because it was not worn down as the other trails closer to the trailhead. The witness believes they were near Brown Mountain when the events began. As they reached the end of the hike, both witnesses became aware of the odd, eerie silence. Up to this point, they were hearing typical forest sounds of various birds. After a short while, they headed back out. Then the rock throwing began. So rock throwing events, points of interest. Rocks were thrown from the left, that is the east. Estimated rock sizes from as small as a golf ball to as large as a softball. So again, she doesn't really get into that in her account. Witnesses did not see most of the rocks being thrown, but they were thrown with sufficient velocity to make a loud thud when they hit the ground. The other witness did clearly see one large rock sailing through the air as it passed overhead. The rock throwing periodically continued as they walked out to a point about midway between the trailhead and the trail heading north. At all times, the rocks were thrown from the east. None of the rocks hit them, but some came uncomfortably close. A broken tree limb was observed from the trail near Brown Mountain. And I like this part. He says, it is unlikely that it was a weather-related event as no other tree damage was observed. However, this researcher is very cautious about attributing various tree breaks and structures to Bigfoot/Sasquatch. I've seen too many of such things that, in my opinion, could be explained by other causes. So I like that. You know, he's kind of, she mentions this, but he's sort of saying, nah, like let's not focus on that. But, you know, and honestly, the rock throwing is a little bit more interesting here. And there are some interesting points in here. One, they say the rocks never hit them. They come close, but they never hit them. And we hear this a lot in these rock throwing Bigfoot stories, that people will say, if Bigfoot wanted to hit me, he could have hit me. Like if this rock wanted to hit me, you know, it could have and should have. Like it'll whiz by their head. It'll land like right behind them or right next to them, close enough where it's sort of almost saying like, if I wanted to get you, I could have gotten you. And I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just trying to like scare you off. So I thought that was interesting. The fact that the rocks change size and seem to get progressively bigger is interesting. It definitely sounds like if this was a creature, if this was Bigfoot, it was getting more aggressive. It was getting angry. And in a way, I don't blame it. And I understand why she was throwing rocks back. You know, at first it just seems sort of playful. It's almost like maybe there's some kids in the woods. So you're throwing rocks back to see if any more come back. You're kind of almost trying to test it. Like, did something throw a rock at me, or was this just something that fell down the hill? Is it in my imagination? And then you're sort of confirming that, yes, something is throwing rocks at me. At that point, though, either this is a person throwing rocks at you or it's Bigfoot throwing rocks at you. Those are the two options you have here. It's not a bear or a raccoon or, you know, a deer. So it's either a person or it's Bigfoot. If it's a person, get out of there, because somebody who's throwing rocks at you in the woods that you can't see, that is a dangerous person. This is someone who, yeah, maybe they're just being playful, but one wrong rock in the wrong place and you now have a concussion, you may be bleeding, you have a fractured bone or skull. It's dangerous. Get out of there. I don't know why she kept throwing the rocks, and it just sounds like she kept doing it. And that is baffling to me. In the beginning, I kind of understand it, but at a certain point, you got to stop and just get out of there. If it's Bigfoot, then yeah, get out of there. Because again, this thing is throwing rocks at you, not to be curious. If it's curious, it's going to peek around a tree and take a look at you. It's not going to, I mean, rock throwing is an aggressive behavior, maybe somewhat playful, but that seems like get out of here, go away. So a really cool encounter. Again, if you take this at face value, she's getting a lot of rocks thrown at her. She's not seeing anything, but her gut is sort of telling her there's something there. I don't know what instinct is. We don't really know how it works. But again, if you feel like there's something dangerous, get out of there. And when you're getting rocks thrown at you, it's time to go. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know why you keep throwing the rocks back. So I'm glad they didn't get hurt. But again, a really interesting story. They didn't see anything. There's no actual sighting of Bigfoot here. But at the same time, I feel like this is a humanoid of some sort. It's either Bigfoot or a person, and neither one is a good possibility. So yeah, what do you guys think of this one? Rock throwing sounds very Bigfoot behavior to me, but I don't know. Okay, so the next two accounts are connected, and we'll get into that. But this is possible vocalizations heard near Sabbath Day Point. So again, Sabbath Day Point. This comes to us from March 31st of 2006. And the exact location withheld by request. Again, some people don't want that disclosed. The nearest road, Route 9 North. Again, observed. I was hiking alone 2 miles south of Sabbath Day Point by Lake George, just off Route 9N. The date was March 31st, 2006. I was near a small body of water when I heard odd sounds about 300 yards away. The sounds were from a large creature. They were sing-song in pattern and unlike anything I have ever heard. The creature appeared to be talking to itself as there was only one creature. It did not sound angry and lasted for about 2 minutes. The sound changed in pitch and fluctuation. I was not scared, but did leave quickly. I have since studied sounds of coyotes and found no similarities at all. There were no yelps, barks, or growls. I cannot duplicate the sounds. It is like nothing I have ever heard in the woods or elsewhere. My wife and I went back 2 weeks later and found no signs of anything out of the norm. Also noticed nothing. Other witnesses, it was just him eating his lunch. Other stories, yes, several sightings and sounds over the years have been reported within 1 mile of my report. This was about noon. It was a calm day, plenty of sunshine in the Adirondack woods near a small pond. So again, I don't typically like vocalizations because people will hear a howl or a scream and they immediately think Bigfoot. And most times it's probably an owl or a fisher cat or a fox or a mountain lion. There's so many things in the woods that can make really weird, spooky sounds, and they're typical normal animals. But this one, it's interesting because he says it was like a sing-song pattern and like it was talking to itself. So it's almost like he's inferring that this thing was speaking, not growling, not yelping, not howling, but talking to itself, maybe like in some sort of language. So follow-up investigation by BFRO investigator Paul Mateja again. He says, I spoke with the witness on October 25th, 2006. The witness experienced 2 vocalization events represented on the website here. So yeah, this first one, he's saying, and we're going to get to the next one after this, but this first one, the first incident occurred March 31st, 2006 around noon. He hiked into a pond southwest of Sabbath Day Point. He heard a very loud and powerful sing-song type of vocalization. It went on for about 2 minutes. The witness described it as almost speech-like, as if the creature was carrying on a conversation, but the witness could not hear any reply in return. So that is what really sticks out to me. It's not just a howl or a scream. He's saying it sounds like it was trying to talk, speech-like that pattern. And we've heard, I've had the Sierra sounds on the show before. I'll link to those again if you guys want to hear those, the samurai chatter. And again, a lot of people, when they hear these things talking, quote unquote, they'll say it sounds either almost Asian, like Japanese, that's hence the samurai chatter, or almost like Eastern European. So Russian or one of those like Eastern Bloc sort of countries, Romanian, just very hard consonants. So really interesting. So let's get into his second report because that is also on here. So here's the other report submitted by the same witness. This one, though, happened in May of 2002, May 11th. So almost 23 years ago to the day. Again, he's withholding the exact location, Sabbath Day Point near Route 9 North. And he says, this was recorded very soon after it happened in our camp journal. It was the weekend of May 11th, 2002. My wife and I were at our seasonal camp on Lake George for the early season. We had bedded down for the night in front of the fireplace. There were only a few lights belonging to other early season camps across the lake. It was a calm night. My wife was sound asleep. She often sleeps through thunderstorms. I was up throughout the night. I was awake for the sound of the first scream. The first cycle did not wake my wife, unfortunately. The second, closer scream did. Something screamed 4 times in the distance. 30 seconds later, it screamed again on our property. We have less than a quarter acre of land. The time was around 2:30 a.m. 30 seconds to a minute later, it screamed for the last time in the distance at a third location. The scream was in an evenly spaced pattern of 4 screams. Each scream was about 3 to 5 seconds apart. The volume was that of human-sized lungs. However, there was no attempt to form words or partial words. The scream did not change pitch. It sounded much like a human female. There was no sound of the creature crashing through the woods. Please note that a few years back, a similar sound was heard by a camp only 5 down from us. Other sightings have occurred very near to my camp. The screams made the hair on our necks stand up, very frightening. There have also been sightings of mountain lions in the area. However, sounds of the mountain lion scream were not like the screams we heard. Also notice there was no sound of the creature in the woods, no breaking of twigs or moving of leaves, no sound at all other than the screams. His wife was a witness to the screams. She was asleep and woken up by the closer scream. And he says this was about 2:30 in the morning in the Adirondack woods. And Paul Mateja does the follow-up investigation again. And he basically summarizes this again. 3 or 4 screams were heard about 5 seconds apart. It sounded something like a human female, but more powerful and blood-curdling. At first, the witness thought it was some kind of bird, but quickly dismissed that idea because of the sheer volume of the sound, as if it was coming from a big animal. And this kind of fluctuates because first he's saying it sounded like human-sized lungs, and now he's saying big animal. So not sure. The witness believes the screams are coming from 3 different animals. One was very close to his camp. The others were as much as 2 miles away. The witness speculated they were either calling to each other or it was territorial in nature. So this one, I'm talking about this one because it is related to the first, the more recent account by this man. This one doesn't impress me as much. The first one where you're talking about almost like a speech-like pattern, a sing-song, and it was very close to him. He's saying, a couple hundred yards. So he's hearing it during the day. It just sounds more bizarre, less easy to explain. This one, again, maybe it was Bigfoot. I don't know, but there are mountain lions in the area, and he's hearing these screams. And a lot of times what will happen is you'll hear something in the woods, and then you go online and say, oh, I'm going to type this in and Google what this sounds like. And it doesn't always sound identical. So you can't just say it didn't really sound like the screams that we heard online and the ones we heard in the woods. And also at 2:30 in the morning, screams are going to frighten you, and your perception can be a little bit off when you're frightened like that. So it just makes me wonder if there's a little bit of a disconnect here. His first story, really interesting. And I like that it's talking about speech pattern almost, like it's talking to itself. It goes on for 2 minutes. I don't know of any animals in the woods that would have that sort of vocalization, if you will. This sounds to me more like a fisher, like a fox, like a mountain lion, just something is screaming. It's during a thunderstorm, so the sound may also have been muffled or altered a little bit to his ears. Hard to say. Again, I'm not saying it's not Bigfoot. I'm just saying this one does not impress me as much as his first story. That first one with the talking, that's a little freaky. So what do you guys think? Do you think both stories are Bigfoot or just the first one? Let me know what you guys think. Okay, story number 4, possible sighting by camper in wee hours at Sabbath Day Point, Lake George. So this comes to us from May 6th of 2001. So another May sighting. So really just relating this tonight. Warren County, off Route 9 west in Lake George region. Nearest town is Lake George, Sabbath Day Point, and observed. I was near Sabbath Day Point in the Lake George region. I am not much of an outdoorsman, so bear with me on the descriptions, terrain, etc. After researching this area, I saw there have been a few sightings in this area, which is why I'm submitting this. So again, it sounds like he had an encounter, saw something, went online to kind of research it, saw that there were others, and decided to submit his report. So very cool. He continues, it was approximately 3:30 in the morning when I awoke. 2 friends and I were in a tent. 5 other friends had a cabin about 1 mile from us. We decided to rough it as much as we could. I went outside the tent to make a phone call on my cell phone. I know, really roughing it. Yeah, I mean, most places in the Adirondacks, you're not going to get cell service, so he's lucky he did. My brother gets off work at 3 a.m. I needed to call him because I needed a ride in the morning. I was about 20 feet from the tent. My friend yelled, I'm trying to sleep, so I walked another 20 feet from the tent. After I spoke to my brother, I saw the time was 3:48 a.m. I then went to go to the bathroom. That's when I heard a noise coming from in front of me. I was easily scared as I am not used to being in the woods very often. I stepped back a little and saw approximately 60 feet in front of me a figure coming up a slight incline in the terrain. My first thought was, okay, bear in front of me, run. As I went to run, I noticed it had turned slightly, and the one main characteristic I noticed was no snout like a bear would have, more like a human face, although I couldn't see features, more of an outline. This really scared me. I ran to the tent and told my friends. They were sure it was a bear, and we waited 10 minutes before going back to the cabin. I later realized that this thing I saw had a human shape. I got to look at it for maybe 5 seconds, and like I said, I'm not much of an outdoorsman and probably wouldn't know a bear from an ape while in the woods, but what I saw was something unusual. It looked like a huge hairy man walking up a hill, fairly blunt, but best way I could describe it. I was thinking it could be a bear on its hind legs, but it went staggering. It was walking. So again, bears don't walk on their hind legs. They can stand up. They can maybe take a step or two, but that's not their typical mode of transportation. You know, they're going to walk on all fours. And standing up is basically to reach food or an intimidation tactic. And this thing sounds like it was too far away to try to intimidate this guy. He continues, the thought of Bigfoot didn't enter my mind until a few days later, and I have to say I don't believe in such tales that I see in supermarket tabloids, but whatever it was, it sure was a unique experience. So I like this story. One, this reminds me a lot of the story that I mentioned earlier that Josh and I were talking about at Good Luck Lake, where this person who related the story to us got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. He had to pee, so he got out of his hammock and walked, you know, a little bit a ways from the camp to pee. And up on this hill in the moonlight, he saw silhouetted a hairy humanoid figure, you know, up on the hill and walking, and not a bear. And the guy who told us his story, he's an outdoorsman. He knows what he's seeing. And he said he went back to his hammock and he didn't sleep the rest of the night. Like, he was spooked. This guy is admitting he's not an outdoorsman, but again, he's thinking bear. He's saying, it doesn't look like a bear. It has no snout and it's standing up and it's walking on 2 legs. He doesn't believe in Bigfoot, but he's seeing what sounds like a Bigfoot. So I feel like this is a really good story. It sounds like it's from a skeptic or just somebody who doesn't think about Bigfoot or believe in Bigfoot. It doesn't even enter his mind. It's just, it almost sounds like just something stuck in the back of his head. It bothered him. You know, he thought it was a bear. All his friends were saying it's a bear. He goes home and it's sticking with him. It's bothering him. What he saw, it wasn't a bear. It was walking. It didn't have a snout. It looked human shaped, but it's hairy and it's walking through the woods at almost 4 a.m. So really cool story. I like this one. Definitely a good sighting. Fair weather. This is not a guy who's out there looking for Bigfoot or expecting to see Bigfoot. He's just thinking bear. And Josh and I, when we go out, we're not as afraid of Bigfoot as we are of bears. You know, we're just trying to keep them away, and we don't want them coming into our camp and going through the cooler and coming into our tents. So we're not really afraid of Bigfoot. We're thinking bear, and sounds like this guy was doing the same thing. So this one is a really cool story. I love this story. Again, very similar to the one that we heard about Good Luck Lake. Hairy man up on a hill, same sort of situation, except our guy was in a hammock, and that story was far more recent. It wasn't, back in 2001. It was probably like a year or so ago. So again, I will link to the Good Luck Lake story down below so you guys can find that one. So be sure to check that out. Very similar to this story. Okay, so we come to our last story regarding Sabbath Day Point. I'm going to come back to Warren County and do more episodes on this because there are some other good stories in here. But like I said, right now I'm just focusing on Sabbath Day Point. So this last story, at Sabbath Day Point, family reports strange sounds near their cabin. So this was in the summer of 92, 93. They don't seem to really remember. Observed. Each occurrence happened over a 2-week period between the hours of 10:30 p.m. to 3 a.m., lasting from 1 to 4 minutes. The first sounds were that of a whirling, shrill whistling, say that 5 times fast, then a deep thumping with the lung capacity of a horse being slaughtered, along with various chattering and screams. So pay attention to the chattering. To hear this once is to not want to hear it again, but it kept coming back almost every night, sounded about 200 feet away. Looked out the window with a small flashlight, but could not see anything. I really did not want to see what it was. I was too terrified. Our cabin was located between Route 9N and the lake, 75 feet from the lake. The mountain directly behind us was Bloomer Mountain. Sometimes the sound started far away on top of the mountain. Then within a minute, the sound was coming from the road area. It may have been two calling to each other. We do not own this property any longer. I wonder why. This is one of the most beautiful areas of the world and not heavily populated. Yeah, it's the Adirondacks. Also noticed, I can't remember if it was before or during, but my 2-year-old woke up crying. She said the creature, quote unquote, creature woke her up. Since then, I've read of others across the lake on Black Mountain Point and at Whitehall, New York. So other witnesses, none. Other stories. In an old book on the history of Lake George, there is a mention of a Sabbath Day Point, and in the short paragraph, the book describes the area and mentions that the local people sit and talk about weather, fishing, and the strange sounds heard in the woods. Well, like I said, Sabbath Day Point has a lot of like high strangeness alleged to be surrounding it. It is also known that Samuel de Champlain and his Indians would not go to a certain island in Lake Champlain due to the creature that inhabited it. So we'll talk about that another time. That's Champ. That's the Lake Champlain lake monster, colloquially known as Champ. And I will talk about that another time. But again, that whole area up there just seems to have a lot of high strangeness, a lot of Bigfoot, a lot of ghost stories, a lot of UFO type stuff. The lake monster in Champlain. But this is weird. The chattering and screams, and it just the way he describes this, it doesn't sound like a typical animal screaming. Again, a lot of people will hear a fox or a fisher and say, "Oh, it sounded like a woman being murdered," and that's usually just a very high pitched scream. This he's talking about a shrill whistling or a whirling, and then a deep thumping, like a horse being slaughtered. And then various chattering and screams, just really weird. And it's kind of sad that they don't live there anymore. And he doesn't say why. I mean, we can kind of maybe infer. We do not own this property any longer. This is one of the most beautiful areas of the world and not heavily populated. So I don't know why they left. I don't know why they don't own the property anymore. Maybe this frightened them off. There's no follow-up investigation here, sadly. So nobody really ever clarified that with him. But again, I don't usually like vocalizations, but this one is interesting because it's not just a howl or a scream. You have this chattering, you have this whistling, you have this thumping, and he's saying it's almost like a call and response, like something very close and then something way off at the top of the mountain. So like things talking to each other. Very, very strange, but very cool. So I like all these stories tonight. I think all of them, except that second story from that other guy. I think that one can be explained. And again, not saying it's not Bigfoot, but I think we have to kind of throw it out. All right, everybody, another Bigfoot in the Adirondacks episode. I love the Adirondacks. It's such a beautiful area and so squatchy and, just so vast. And I hate the term squatchy, but it is like you go there and it's you can just imagine looking across the river and seeing Bigfoot coming down and scooping up water. I mean, there's no people around. Josh and I go pretty deep into these places, and it's remote. Most of the Adirondacks is remote, not heavily populated. I mean, you have little pockets. We were like 8.5 miles from Wells, which is a tiny, tiny little town. It's barely got cell phone service there, and the next big town is, an hour away. So really desolate and remote, beautiful, lush woods. And these stories tonight, very cool. Like I said, near John Pond, but closer to Lake George. But John Pond kind of sits on that border of Warren and Hamilton counties, and I've done Hamilton already. So I wanted to hit Warren County and Sabbath Day Point, because Sabbath Day Point just keeps coming up over and over again in my research for different things. So I just keep seeing it. So I wanted to focus on that tonight. If you guys have a story, Bigfoot story, you have a place you want me to cover on the show, shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com. I'm happy to focus on any area you want to do. I've already done a couple of audience member requested episodes on areas where they live or they want me to focus on. If you have a story, I'd love to talk to you. We can keep it private. I can just read it on the air if you don't want to come on the show. So however you want to work that. And that is it for this week, everybody. Until next time, question everything. These stories are really interesting, but question, I mean, even little things like, why did this woman keep throwing the rocks even after she was scared? It's just a weird thing. Why did she do that? Who would throw rocks at her in the woods? uh, this thing that this guy saw, he thought it was a bear. Could it have been a bear? I doubt it. He says it was walking up on two legs. It's walking, not, on four legs. So question everything, everybody. That's how we get to the truth. Doesn't mean we don't believe, doesn't mean we're trying to tear down any stories here, doesn't mean we're being disrespectful to the witnesses. We just have to question it because we weren't there. And asking further questions gets more information. As you can kind of see with some of these accounts where there's no follow-up investigation, if you can't question certain things, you don't have the full story. Why do these people no longer own that land? Were they scared off, or do they just have to move? They get a job somewhere else. So sometimes by questioning things, we get more pieces of the puzzle. So question everything, always. Embrace the weirdness, everybody. Rock and roll. See you next week.